I was a fool for not recognizing the red flags earlier, and if I had been more vigilant, I might have uncovered my wife's affair much sooner. My wife was unfaithful and had an expertly crafted narrative that she stuck to, but as they say, all truths eventually come to the surface, and I made up my mind to get back at her. I'm Christopher Wright, a married man in my mid-40s. My lovely wife, Evelyn, is 2 years younger than me. Our daughter, Rachel, is 16, and our son, Brandon, is 14. At the beginning of this story, we were still a conventional suburban middle-class family living with decent careers and a comfortable life that seemed peaceful until everything fell apart. It was a chilly Thursday in November. Feeling miserable with the flu, I chose to stay in bed all day. Evelyn, whose workday began half an hour after mine, felt fine and headed to the bathroom for a shower. I was taken aback when she took her clothes to change in the bathroom. My surprise heightened when I heard the door lock. Intrigued, I took the safety tool from the kitchen drawer designed to unlock doors from the outside when the kids accidentally locked them, and after waiting a few minutes, I unlocked the door once I heard the shower turn off. The sight in the bathroom left me stunned. Evelyn was wearing incredibly gorgeous black lace lingerie and high stockings, which I had never seen before. I couldn't help but ask, why the sexy outfit? Why the secrecy? Do you have a boyfriend? She hesitated, a worried look flashing across her face before she responded, don't be ridiculous. You know Lisa and I are going to the mall for our monthly shopping after work today. Might take a while. Feeling uncomfortable, I snapped, that revealing outfit is more suitable for undressing than for shopping. Her anger ignited as she shouted, are you insinuating that I'm some sort of immoral woman? I retorted that I wasn't accusing her of anything, just pointing out that, for some unknown reason, she was dressed provocatively. She kept yelling, how would you even know how women like that dress? I recalled James boasting about his experiences at the pub and told her. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door, a clear sign that our marriage was heading in the wrong direction. James, her ex-boyfriend, had once been a union boss, and in moments of anger, Evelyn had occasionally mentioned regretting choosing me over him after he betrayed her. However, once James was fired and divorced for misusing the union credit card at a luxury brothel during an international meeting, any mention of him became unwelcome for her. Yet, I noticed a strange look on her face when she hesitated momentarily, confirming that my question had struck a nerve. Determined to uncover the truth, I started investigating in our home office, where Evelyn meticulously organized and managed our bills and records. It took some time, but eventually, I gathered several clues that didn't add up. There were no anomalies on our joint Visa account. However, upon scrutinizing the statements from her personal account, I noticed some oddities. Although Evelyn and Lisa usually went shopping together once a month, consistently on Thursdays and mid-month, none of her purchases were made on those Thursdays. Instead, they always occurred a day or several days before the usual Thursday shopping trip. Things took a turn when I discovered that she had bought gas at a Shell service station about 25 kilometers away from our town on one of her so-called shopping days. Why would a trip to the mall take her so far from town? There wasn't even a small grocery store or cafe at that service station. The only plausible explanation was that she had visited one of the small cabins the service station rented out to travelers, sales representatives, or people with questionable motives, likely due to the much lower cost compared to a hotel room in the city. I had doubts about Evelyn's monthly shopping trips, but I didn't have solid evidence of her unfaithfulness. A simple gas bill wasn't enough to justify a separation, not yet, at least. I decided it would be wiser to wait until after Christmas and New Year's to confront her and gather more concrete information about her activities. However, I chose to make the next shopping trip a bit more intriguing. Knowing that the wine store at the mall closed at 6 p.m., I called Evelyn's cell phone about 20 minutes after 5 o'clock. After a few rings, she answered, sounding anxious. I asked if she was at the mall, and she said she was at Gap. I asked her to buy me a bottle of whiskey for my flu since the liquor store was right next to Gap and closed at 6 o'clock. Ending the call, Evelyn faced a quandary. If she was involved in intimate activities with her lover in a Motel 6 cabin, she could either sacrifice time with him to buy the whiskey, losing more than an hour of their precious time together, or skip the whiskey and risk a confrontation with me. She chose the latter, clearly prioritizing being with her lover, wherever they were and whatever they were doing, rather than running to buy my whiskey. When she came home without it, she simply apologized, saying there had been a long wait at Gap and the liquor store had already closed by the time she got there. I didn't believe her. What kept you at Gap for so long? Can I see the receipt? I asked. She realized she had fallen into a trap and loudly responded, I bought my clothes with my own money. Why would I need to show you a receipt? If you even have one, I replied, because the receipt shows when you bought your clothes, and you know you needed to return defective items. Liar. You just didn't want to do me that small favor after our argument this morning. Seeing my last comment as an opportunity to avoid the issue, she snapped, it's foolish for you to expect favors from me after accusing me of being promiscuous just because of what I wore this morning. I grinned and calmly asked, did your lover compliment how stunning you looked in that new black lace outfit? If you're indeed involved with some gigolo, remember that in this relationship, infidelity equals divorce. That comment unleashed the worst profanity I'd ever heard from Evelyn. I couldn't help but be fascinated by her acting skills, pretending to be offended. Even her mastery of cursing left a lasting impression on me. That night, the atmosphere in our home was frigid. While it was clear that Evelyn had done something behind my back, I was still left to discover what, where, and with whom. Her cell phone could provide crucial information. Since we had identical phones and charged them in the kitchen, I took the opportunity that night to switch our phones. The next morning, Evelyn left for work without any protests, leaving me in bed. Once she was gone, I decided to snoop through her phone. There was a brief message, the photo is coming soon. Waiting for your comments. The sender was unknown to me, as Evelyn's contacts only consisted of her closest friends. Searching the phone number online yielded no results. Evidently, it was from a disposable phone. However, my luck changed when the phone received a notification. It was a photo taken the day before, showing Evelyn in her seductive black lingerie, sent by the same unknown sender. The attached message simply said, "Darling, you're incredible." Even without a sender's name, I recognized the culprit. The unmistakable, high-quality, both artistic and technical nature of the image served as a giveaway. There was only one person capable of producing photographs of such professional caliber, the insufferable Bradley Cameron, the husband of Stacey Cameron, one of Evelyn's childhood best friends. Bradley was known for his photographic skill and had once boasted, while inebriated at a pub, about taking a similar picture of a coworker. I'd never been fond of him due to his incessant arrogance, constantly portraying himself as being superior in every way. It was easy to picture how much he had ridiculed me behind my back every time he met up with Evelyn, who was far more attractive than his own wife. There was only one lingering question, how could Evelyn be involved with such a pompous jerk? It was a month and a half before Christmas and New Year's, and I chose not to confront her during the festive season, opting instead to keep a low profile until then. There would be no direct confrontations with Bradley, but that didn't mean he wouldn't face repercussions later on. My day rapidly filled with activity. First, I uploaded the photo of Evelyn to my laptop and couldn't help but admire it. She appeared remarkably youthful and alluring. That contemptible Bradley had really done a commendable job with the camera. The contented expression on Evelyn's face indicated the photo must have been taken after their intimate encounter. My next task proved more demanding. I had to make several phone calls before everything was set up for Bradley's punishment. Being a native of my hometown, I knew a diverse range of individuals who could help me achieve what I had in mind, and I was confident it would justify the fairly steep price. As anticipated, Evelyn returned home from work with my cell phone, only to grow increasingly annoyed when I accused her of taking it. She had deleted the photo from her phone, which likely baffled both her and Bradley when he tried to resend it. I remained silent, letting them believe something had gone wrong. The first phase of my retribution unfolded the following Monday when Stacy and Bradley were at work and their kids were at school. A tractor hauling a trailer filled with approximately 3 tons of animal manure from a nearby farm dumped its load in the front yard of the Camerons' residence. With the temperature well above freezing, a foul stench soon permeated the entire neighborhood. A prominent sign amidst the manure read, "Fertilizer available for purchase," much to the great displeasure of the neighbors. I could easily picture a furious Bradley dialing the police, and his complaint most certainly escalated into a confrontation when the authorities didn't consider his heap of free manure a serious enough offense to warrant immediate action. On Wednesday morning, while reading our local newspaper during breakfast, I came across a large photograph of Bradley standing next to the "Fertilizer available for purchase" sign by his pile of manure. As expected, he was complaining about the police, who had simply asked him to complete a form outlining his concerns and promised to address them at their earliest convenience. I burst out laughing, which prompted Evelyn to ask what was so amusing. "Some fool in the fertilizer business can now truthfully claim he's the right man in the right place," I responded. Evelyn took the newspaper from me, and I continued chuckling, but for some reason, she didn't share my amusement. Instead, her face turned crimson, and she shouted, "You must be out of your mind to find that funny." I kept grinning as I replied, "You've completely lost your sense of humor. The combination of manure and that man is genuinely quite amusing." "Stacy is one of my best friends," Evelyn retorted. "How can you, a contemptible person, laugh at her serious problems?" With an elevated voice, I responded, "Is it my fault that poor Stacy ended up married to that fool and worthless Bradley Cameron? She probably envies you for being married to a real man." I could tell that Evelyn didn't share my sentiment as she left the table without uttering a word, leaving me with the unsettling feeling that her affection for me was waning, if it had ever existed at all. Shortly afterward, Evelyn caught the flu, which put any thoughts of intimacy on hold for the next 2 weeks. During that period, I searched her car for any evidence of an affair with Bradley, but came up empty-handed. Eventually, I resorted to purchasing a new voice-activated mini recorder and discreetly hid it in her car. When Evelyn finally recovered, neither of us made any attempt to rekindle intimacy. In fact, there hadn't been any between us since the weekend before her infamous November shopping trip. Now, she was preparing for her December shopping trip with Lena. Although I had accused her of being promiscuous during her November outing, I had hoped she would be wise enough to cancel her December date with Bradley. Evidently, he was important enough to her that she was willing to take the risk. As anticipated, we had an argument that morning when I mentioned I had a dentist appointment and would be leaving the house later than usual. Evelyn accused me of snooping on her to see what underwear she would select for her shopping day. She became furious when I admitted that I would prefer to see her dressed less provocatively for her peculiar shopping trip or whatever else she had planned for the evening. Later in the afternoon, I called Evelyn 10 minutes before her workday ended and informed her that I wouldn't be home that night but reassured her that her mother had promised to come over and prepare some food for our kids. As expected, she exclaimed, "What's so crucial that you can't be home tonight?" I responded, "A very special mission, my dear, of utmost importance. My friends have caught wind of rumors that your friend, the fertilizer dealer, Bradley Cameron, intends to meet one of his lovers in a cabin at Q8. We plan to observe both Bradley and the cabin. I'm sure Stacy will be thrilled to get rid of him once we catch him in the act and collect concrete evidence of his infidelity." As anticipated, Evelyn expressed her disapproval of my mission. She exclaimed, "Bradley is practically family. You must be deranged to even consider humiliating one of our friends in such a preposterous way." I replied, "You're speaking for yourself. That scoundrel has never been a friend to me. You've always despised cheaters, so why the sudden change of heart toward that despicable guy?" Her response, dripping with frustration, was, "I still detest cheaters, make no mistake, but I know how profoundly our friends, Stacy and Bradley, care for each other, so I choose to believe in them over the baseless rumors spread by your so-called friends." What a deceptive woman. I didn't give a damn about Bradley that night. I was still preoccupied with my plan for revenge, but Evelyn must have been alarmed by my call and called off her date with Bradley for that night, and, hopefully, for the remainder of December. Nevertheless, I was curious to see how she would behave now that Bradley was out of the picture. That night, the thought of keeping tabs on Bradley caused Evelyn to lose all interest in her supposedly crucial monthly shopping trip with Lena. I tailed her car directly from work. I parked at a distance, approached her vehicle in the driveway, and unlocked it using the spare key attached to my own car keys. I retrieved the small recorder and then drove to a parking lot to listen to the recordings. The first recording seemed to be of Evelyn giving a colleague a ride and contained nothing of relevance. However, the later recordings were much more captivating. She immediately called Bradley, presumably right after getting into her car, just a few minutes after my call. Evelyn sounded deeply troubled. "Hello, sweetheart. We have to cancel our plans for today because some of Jake's friends have discovered you're renting the cabin at Q8, and they're curious to know who you're meeting. Yes, even Jake is involved in watching. Jake accused me of cheating during our last outing, but they'll never suspect you're having an affair with me. Maybe a woman from your office would fit their suspicions better." "No, Bradley, absolutely not. Refusing to buy Jake that damn brandy was a colossal mistake. It tipped him off that I was lying about the shopping trip. Now he's skeptical and looking for evidence. I can't let him become more suspicious. It was reckless of me to agree to see you today. I'm heading straight home." "No, Bradley, there's no chance. We can't do anything until January. I'll see you at our New Year's celebration, and please don't even think about coming to my place." "No, no, no. Yes, Bradley, I love you too." After the call with Bradley, she called Lena. "Unfortunately, I have to cancel my date with Bradley today. Some of Jake's friends have heard whispers about Bradley, and they'll be keeping an eye on me tonight. Yes, even Jake is aware. We'll have to postpone it until January, maybe later. Talk soon." What a duplicitous woman. That was the definitive confirmation I needed. Up until now, I had only suspected Bradley and had even penalized him without solid proof, but now I had undeniable evidence. My next move would be to figure out a permanent solution. An hour later, back at home, I asked Evelyn, "Are you already back? It's odd that you and Lena managed to finish shopping so quickly, just before Christmas." She responded, "It would be better if we went together on Saturday to buy Christmas presents. You're back early from your immoral crusade. Looks like that cheating rogue, Bradley, cancelled his rendezvous. Did you tip him off to shield poor Stacy from a scandal?" Her face flushed before she exclaimed, "Don't you dare think I'd be involved in your filthy schemes." Upon further examination of the receipts and Evelyn's files, it became clear that her so-called shopping trips had been happening regularly since November of the previous year, with only July being an exception due to our summer holiday. Evelyn had deceived me at least a dozen times, and now it was evident that her November escapade marked their one-year anniversary. This explained her unusually suggestive attire that day. From what I could gather, she hadn't dressed provocatively for the cancelled December rendezvous. A cancelled date didn't negate her previous actions. 12 instances of betrayal far exceeded what any reasonable husband could endure. My affection for Evelyn evaporated completely. The next day, I decided to teach Lena a lesson. I sent an anonymous postcard to her husband's workplace with a picture of the most luxurious hotel in town and the message, "Your wife is cheating on you at this location." Though it was an embellishment, I was confident the message would cause an uproar in their marriage. Christmas came and went without any conflicts or intimacy between Evelyn and me, but I could sense she was discontented because I had given her more modest gifts than usual. Finally, the New Year's gathering, which Evelyn and I were hosting, arrived. We dedicated considerable effort to embellishing the house and moved some furniture to make room for dancing. I even constructed a makeshift bar for the occasion, stocked with imported spirits from Germany. As our visitors arrived, I stationed myself behind the bar, preparing personalized drinks for both the men and the women. Stacy and Bradley joined the gathering, accepting their beverages like everyone else, but there was a slight modification in Bradley's drink, one that had required a fair amount of effort to acquire. To my satisfaction, everything proceeded smoothly. As anticipated, Bradley had already indulged in a few drinks prior to the party and didn't turn down any additional offerings during the meal. The combination of alcohol, coupled with the altered drink, left him feeling noticeably weary. It was Evelyn who suggested that he rest for a while in our guest room, an idea even Stacy endorsed. Stacy and I assisted him into the room and tucked him into bed. When I had a chance to sneak back into the guest room, I found Bradley asleep on the mattress. Despite not typically favoring beer, I had consumed several and found myself in dire need of relief. It was an immense relief when I discreetly urinated on Bradley while he slumbered, making it appear as if he had soiled the bed himself. Neither my entrance nor departure from the guest room was noticed by anyone. After some time, I inquired with Stacy about Bradley's condition. When I learned that she hadn't been monitoring him, we both went to the guest room. As soon as we opened the door, the overpowering stench of urine assailed us, prompting Stacy to shriek in dismay. I swiftly returned to the party and loudly announced, "That fool Bradley wet the bed." My proclamation drew everyone's attention, and many headed to witness Bradley's predicament firsthand. It was evident that this embarrassment would follow him for quite some time. Initially, Evelyn insisted that I assist Bradley and escort him home, but my resolute response of, "I wouldn't touch that scoundrel with a 10-foot pole," left her stunned. One of the sober guests took pity on him and drove him home, wrapped in an old blanket, with Stacy and Evelyn accompanying them. The rest of us carried on with the party, finding humor in this newfound source of amusement, as Bradley wasn't particularly liked among the men. To everyone's astonishment, Stacy returned to the gathering with Evelyn shortly afterward. As the celebration continued and toasts were made, Evelyn, appearing self-conscious, questioned me, "Why didn't you kiss me?" I responded, "Why should I? We're married, aren't we? Isn't that reason enough for me not to kiss you?" Others began to show interest and listen to our conversation. Evelyn insisted, "If you truly love me, you should kiss me as the first thing you do in the new year." She was taken aback and looked pale when I replied, "We have more pressing matters to deal with." Evelyn quickly retreated to the kitchen to prepare a late-night cocktail, and the guests who had overheard our interaction glanced at me, expecting some form of clarification. However, I remained tight-lipped. Instead, I sought out Lena and led her to a quiet corner. I inquired, "Did you and Evelyn really skip your customary monthly shopping trip in December?" With a bewildered expression, Lena responded, "You should ask Evelyn. She was the one who called to cancel." Acknowledging her reply, I pressed on, "All right. But can you confirm whether you and Evelyn actually went shopping during those excursions? The credit card statements don't reflect any purchases on those particular days. All the supposed shopping seems to have been done just before those outings. How do you explain that?" Lena's frustration flared, and she snapped back, "Why are you grilling me about it? If you're so worried about Evelyn's shopping patterns, why don't you ask your own wife? Evelyn always claimed we went shopping together, but it appears you're oblivious to these outings. I think both you and Evelyn owe your spouses some answers." Lena's husband, now standing beside us, questioned her, "What were you actually doing during those supposed shopping trips? Did you end up with someone at the Grand Hotel?" The postcard I had sent to him certainly stirred up conflict in their relationship, as Lena began to sob and admit, "I never went anywhere with Evelyn. I only pretended to cover for her. Whatever she was up to is her own concern." Having had a bit too much to drink, Lena's husband wasn't in the mood for lies or justifications. He fixed his stare on her and demanded, "It's time to come clean. What were you and Evelyn really doing during those outings?" Realizing the pretense was over, Lena confessed, "Evelyn was meeting up with her lover, and I just went shopping." Lena's husband demonstrated his keen insight by recognizing that if he pressured his wife to expose Evelyn's affair, Evelyn might reciprocate by revealing something about Lena's own indiscretions, so he insisted, "Who's the guy involved?" Through her tears, Lena responded, "I don't know." "Don't lie." "Who is it?" he demanded, his voice rising. Finally, Lena relented, "It's Bradley Harris." Feigning shock, I interjected, "That sleazy bedwetter? What horrible taste." Avoiding both Evelyn and Stacy, Lena exited the party alongside her husband. Meanwhile, I continued managing the bar, and Evelyn carefully avoided speaking to me until we shared a late-night cocktail, sipping in silence. Once the last guest left, the moment of truth arrived, something we had both been anticipating. Evelyn took the initiative and asked, "Why didn't you want to kiss me? How long have you known about what I've been doing?" I admitted that it was hard to say, but that night Lena had divulged the reality behind what I had suspected ever since I got sick and witnessed how provocatively Evelyn dressed for her rendezvous with her lover. Evelyn paled and asked, "Don't tell me Lena was drunk enough to spill fantasies. What exactly did she say?" I replied, "I'm positive Lena spoke the plain truth. Your so-called monthly shopping trips were nothing more than a cover for sneaking away to meet your lover in a Q8 cabin." Evelyn's temper flared, but she wasn't prepared to back down. She asked, "Can you identify this supposed phantom lover?" "Of course." "It was a revolting revelation," I stated. "Lena disclosed that your lover is that bedwetting scoundrel, Bradley Harris, and her admission validates my suspicions." Evelyn erupted, "That deceitful woman spilled everything. Did she also bring up her own affairs, like the one with Ralph Norman, the retired hockey player?" She stormed furiously into the bedroom, and I pursued her, yelling, "You deceitful woman, get out of this room. You'll be staying in the guest room from now on." She objected, but I countered, "It's not my fault that your lover wets the bed. That's your mess to deal with, not mine." Evelyn refused to leave, but I physically removed her from the room. I set the alarm for 8 a.m. and climbed into bed. Despite the agony and a throbbing headache, I rose early to brew a strong cup of coffee in the kitchen, seething with rage. That wretched Bradley had shattered my peaceful marriage in one swift blow, and he was going to get what he deserved. I dialed his home phone, and fortunately, Stacy answered. I informed her that after they had departed, Lena revealed that Evelyn and her husband had been engaging in an affair for over a year, a confession that Evelyn later corroborated herself. Then I called Lena's husband and told him that Evelyn flew into a rage when confronted about Lena's revelation of her affair with Bradley, and she even hurled accusations about Lena's involvement with Ralph Norman. Granted, involving Lena in this was not entirely fair, but she had actively contributed to the downfall of my marriage. Later, I discovered that after Evelyn had revealed her infidelity to her husband, he swiftly took matters into his own hands with Ralph Norman, confronting him and delivering a severe beating right at his doorstep, witnessed by his entire family. When Evelyn entered the kitchen, it was evident that both her marriage and her affair with Bradley Harris were coming to an end. I confronted her, "Was our intimacy at home so insufficient that you had to pursue extramarital flings? Do you care for that disgusting Bradley Harris so much that pleasing him once a month became more important than your commitment to our relationship?" Evelyn wept bitterly, "I don't love him. It was just an exhilarating distraction that made me feel alive again. My love is for you, and only you. You are my true love, not him. With him, it was purely physical, a mistake, not real affection. Please, forgive me. Let's stay together for the sake of our family and our children." I was curious and asked, "How long has this affair been happening?" She responded, "I only saw him 3 times, and we didn't get intimate during our first meeting. We only had 2 encounters because you cancelled our December plan." "What a deceitful woman!" I exclaimed. "You fell right into my trap and skipped your so-called shopping trip when I called you about Bradley because you had already done your shopping days earlier. You could have saved our marriage if you just cancelled your November date when your new seductive lingerie aroused my suspicions." Offering you brandy was just a setup. I assumed you and that scoundrel were commemorating some anniversary that meant more to you than preserving our relationship. I've scrutinized your credit card statements for Lena and your so-called monthly shopping trips over the past year. The only transactions during those supposed outings were gas charges at the Q8 station outside of town. So, your two supposed shopping trips are obviously a fabrication, aren't they? I reiterated, I'm absolutely certain you were intimate with him at least 12 times from November to November. One instance of infidelity is already too much, so the exact count is irrelevant. However, I would like to understand when, how, and why your betrayal started. Evelyn stayed silent, tears pouring down her cheeks, before fleeing to the guest room. She had confessed to cheating without me needing to bring up the phone call recordings or the photos Bradley had sent her. It was easier for her to believe that I had pieced together most of my information from Lena during the party. Both Stacy and Lena called Evelyn on New Year's Day, and it wasn't difficult to discern that those conversations ended the long-standing friendships between Evelyn and two of her closest companions. Although I publicly humiliated myself over a pathetic bedwetter, I was left with only one option to avoid further disgrace. I didn't hesitate to file for divorce on the first business day after New Year's. Evelyn never disclosed the real reason for her infidelity, not even a year later. The year following Evelyn's and my disastrous New Year's party turned out to be a tough one for me. Despite Evelyn's efforts to salvage our marriage, we finalized the divorce in July. She kept quiet about her affair with Bradley, leaving much of it cloaked in secrecy for me. Surprisingly, Evelyn and Bradley's affair set off a chain reaction of divorces, leading to 4 separations: Evelyn and I, Stacy and Bradley, Lena and her husband, and Ralph Norman and his trophy wife. Stacy quickly got rid of Bradley and soon found herself in a relationship with her boss, whom she married by August. Whispers circulated that Bradley had sensed something was amiss long before the divorce process began, using it as an excuse for his affair with Evelyn. However, he never managed to uncover any concrete proof to support his suspicions. After realizing that canceling our divorce was no longer an option, Evelyn came to terms with it, aided by her family and friends. I bought out her share of our house, and with that money, she purchased a small condo where she moved in with Bradley. However, their relationship rapidly unraveled, resulting in a breakup within just a month after a heated argument. Bradley moved out, and the rumors about his bedwetting incident even pushed him to leave town. Evelyn and I now share custody of our children. They primarily stay with me but spend some weekends at her place. Despite the whispers that Evelyn isn't seeing anyone, I remained indifferent, just as I hadn't cared about Lena, her husband, her fling with Ralph, or his wife. It wasn't until Christmas that, to my surprise and relief, I discovered there were plenty of single women willing to share an evening with me when I ventured into singles bars in search of companionship. Despite missing Evelyn terribly, I knew I couldn't welcome her back after the betrayal. A close friend urged me to leave all that mess behind and join him on a trip to Bali for Christmas and New Year, along with his cousin who had a spare vacation ticket after his recent breakup. It turned out to be the highlight of my entire year. On our second day at the resort, we ended up sharing a table with 2 divorced sisters from Germany. Even though my friend was a decade older than me, Monique, one of the sisters, was an elegant woman with a graceful figure, and I felt genuinely comfortable in her company. We spent the rest of the vacation together, exploring local sites, enjoying deep conversations over cocktails, and dancing under the tropical night sky. Upon returning home, I realized I missed Monique far more than I had ever desired to reconnect with Evelyn. However, I was faced with the challenge of finding suitable employment in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, where Monique managed a thriving financial consulting firm. Conversely, moving to my city would mean she couldn't easily continue her profession. So, the only feasible option was to schedule occasional weekend trips to visit her in Switzerland. Yet, those trips were likely going to be called off indefinitely. When I got back from Bali, I found out that a new neighbor had moved into the house next to mine. She was a recently divorced attorney, strikingly attractive and a few years younger than me, with a daughter named Julia, who was the same age as my own daughter. Unexpectedly, the girls hit it off right away. With practicality in mind, I invited Julia's mother, Megan, over for coffee. Megan was a composed and charming woman. She offered to lend a hand with various household projects, which led to enjoyable coffee breaks afterward. I found myself thinking about her more often, but I chose to move slowly, testing the waters to see if she was genuinely interested in me or if she simply saw me as a convenient handyman. Before long, it became apparent that she had invented a few minor problems around her house just as an excuse to have coffee with me. Megan must have been quite a refined spouse to her ex-husband, and it seemed improbable that she would stay single for long post-divorce. Naturally, the truth is that shy guys seldom end up with stunning women, which is why one Friday afternoon, I gathered enough courage to call Megan at her office and ask her out for dinner that evening. She gently declined, saying, "No thanks for tonight, but I suggest we go out another time." Instead, she suggested we order takeout from a new Mediterranean place and share it at her house with our kids, indicating that she wasn't keen on a traditional date just yet. I accepted her offer, and surprisingly, the dinner turned out to be a delightful experience, almost like a real family gathering that it marked a meaningful step in nurturing a closer bond with my captivating neighbor. After dinner, when our teenagers had left, Megan and I uncorked a bottle of wine and settled comfortably on the sofa. We plunged into conversations about our divorces and our aspirations for the future. Megan had separated from her ex after the second instance of abuse, having witnessed far too much turmoil inflicted by violent men at her workplace. She locked her eyes on me and posed a straightforward question: "Have you ever been aggressive or violent with your ex?" I responded earnestly, assuring her that I had never raised a hand against any woman, not even Evelyn, despite her deceit. However, I disclosed to Megan the repercussions Evelyn faced for her unfaithfulness, which culminated in 4 divorces, the loss of her home, spouse, lover, and 2 of her closest friendships, as well as the unwelcome attention from men due to her newly tarnished reputation. Then Megan brought up my vacation to Bali and inquired if I had participated in any regrettable activities that ought to have been avoided. Even though I comprehended her implication, I feigned innocence and responded, "Sorry, I didn't quite understand your question. Could you clarify?" It was apparent that my response struck a nerve as she snapped back, "Don't act clueless. I want to know if you paid women like that for any inappropriate services during your time in Bali, because the man who invited me to dinner wants to know why that's important for me to figure out." I reassured her, "No, I didn't. But I won't deny that I spent time with a divorced German woman there. She had left her ex due to infidelity and was single. Bear in mind, this occurred when I was also unattached and not involved with anyone back home." Megan pressed further, "Do you plan on seeing that German woman again?" I answered truthfully, "Yes, we've talked about it, but only if we both remain unattached." "Why does this date mean so much to you?" She beamed with a bright smile and asked, "Are you seeing anyone at the moment?" Wearing my warmest smile, I replied, "I can't say for sure, but I'm putting in effort to capture the attention of a certain lovely lady for a date." She grew solemn and responded, "I'd say it's off to a good start, but there's still a long way to go. You know, my divorce has been a dreadful experience so far, but I still cling to the hope of finding companionship and love with a man who genuinely cares about me. He has to be sincere and dependable and win Julia's approval. In return, I vow to always be truthful and loyal to him." Interestingly, many men seem to assume that the sole interest a divorced woman has is physical intimacy, which has led to numerous offers for dates, including some from married men. Up until now, I've politely turned down all offers except 2. The first encounter was an absolute catastrophe, and you, Jack, are the second person who has sparked my interest. However, we must both understand that we need to get to know each other far better before making any serious commitments regarding the future. Even so, I couldn't ignore the reality that one of my strengths was that Julia had already approved of me and held a lot of fondness for Henry and Samantha as well. I nodded in agreement, willing to accept the sacrifice of a fantastic weekend of romance in Switzerland for the opportunity to build a profound connection with Megan, even if the physical aspect of our relationship had to be postponed until we became truly acquainted. Although it might not equate to what I experienced with Monique, I had witnessed others seamlessly blend fragmented families into harmonious new beginnings, so I felt confident that Megan and I could achieve the same if it's what we both earnestly desired. As we strengthened our bond over the next few months, Megan and I spent more time together, our children included. We had joint outings, family dinners, and movie nights, and the connection between us intensified. Our friendship gradually evolved into something more, but we were cautious, making sure not to hurry anything. The well-being of the children was our primary concern, and it brought me a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't experienced in a long time. One evening, when the kids were out for a sleepover at a friend's house, I invited Megan over for a quiet dinner. We shared a few glasses of wine and laughed about the small things. Then, she looked at me with a warm, genuine expression. "Jake," she whispered, "I'm ready to take the next step, if you are." That night marked a turning point in our relationship. We knew it wouldn't be easy, blending two families and handling the emotional baggage we both carried, but it felt like a new beginning, something neither of us had dared to hope for after the bitterness of our previous marriages. A year later, Megan and I were engaged. Our children were overjoyed, and we had a small, private ceremony with just family and a few close friends. As I looked at Megan, standing by my side with a radiant smile, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: serenity and contentment. Life was surprisingly calm after the wedding. The adjustment period of merging two families wasn't without its challenges, but overall, it went more smoothly than either of us had anticipated. Julia and my daughter, Sophia, had already been close friends, which made the transition easier. Henry, on the other hand, took a bit longer to warm up to Megan, but she handled his initial coldness with patience and grace. Over time, Henry began to respect her for how she treated his father, with genuine care and affection. Evelyn, of course, was less than pleased about the new family dynamic. The divorce had left her bitter, and I knew she regretted her actions. She even attempted to stir up trouble a few times by alleging that I wasn't respecting our co-parenting arrangement, but it didn't lead anywhere. I'd made it clear to both Evelyn and the family court that I would do whatever it took to provide our children with a stable environment, and for once, she decided not to push things too far. The rumors in town about our divorces and new marriages simmered down after a few months. People eventually shifted their attention to the next scandal, and we were able to continue our lives in peace. I remained dedicated to my work, finding fulfillment in balancing a busy career with being a present father and husband. Megan's legal career also flourished again after she established a small private practice. It was evident that she had rediscovered her professional rhythm, and I couldn't have been prouder of her achievements. But every now and then, remnants of the past resurfaced. There were days when I would catch a glimpse of Evelyn standing outside our old house as I drove by, her gaze fixed on the home that now belonged entirely to me. She looked lost. The vibrant, self-assured woman I'd once married appeared to be a mere shadow of her former self. The idea of approaching her and offering some sort of comfort briefly crossed my mind, but I never acted on it. Evelyn had made her choices, and the reality was that they'd left scars on both of us, scars that still ached from time to time. One weekend, Megan and I took the kids out for a picnic at the state park. It was a perfect day, sunny, with a gentle breeze that made the leaves sway softly. We spread out a blanket near the lake, and the children raced off to skip stones and climb on the rocks. Megan and I sat close together, watching them, my arm resting comfortably around her shoulders. "I'm content, you know," she said softly, tilting her head to look up at me. "Yeah." I smiled, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "I am too. Much more than I ever thought I'd be again." Megan's smile faded slightly as she turned her gaze toward the kids, who were laughing and splashing water at each other. Sometimes I think about how everything turned out. How our lives would have been different if we hadn't gone through what we did. Different, maybe, I agreed. But not necessarily better. She nodded thoughtfully. I think you're right. The difficult times brought us together, didn't they? They did. I kissed her forehead. And we made it through. But even as I said those words, I felt the faint stirrings of old wounds. Memories of Evelyn's betrayal, Bradley's mocking grin in that photograph, and the heartache of discovering just how deeply deceit had been interwoven into the fabric of my former marriage. Some nights, the images still haunted me, and I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd been so blind. Yet, looking at Megan now, her fingers intertwined with mine, I realized something I hadn't before. The pain, the anger, and the betrayal, they hadn't been in vain. They had paved the way for a new chapter in my life, a chapter filled with love, understanding, and a bond that was forged not out of passion, but out of a profound, mutual respect for what we had overcome. As the years went by, Megan and I continued to build the life we had envisioned. We traveled together, explored new places, and created cherished memories. Our children grew up, and although we had our share of typical teenage challenges, they remained close and grounded. Evelyn eventually moved away. She never remarried, as far as I knew, but she seemed to have found a sense of peace in her solitude. She stayed connected with our children, maintaining her role as their mother, but kept her distance from me and Megan. It wasn't until our youngest child, Henry, graduated from high school that I finally closed the door on my past completely. He delivered his valedictorian speech, and I remember sitting in the audience, watching with pride, tears welling up in my eyes as he spoke with such confidence and conviction. Evelyn was there too, sitting a few rows away. Our eyes met briefly, and for the first time in years, she offered me a small, genuine smile. It was a smile of acceptance, perhaps even of forgiveness. I nodded in return, acknowledging the unspoken understanding that passed between us. It was as if we both recognized that, despite everything, we had made it to the other side. No longer adversaries, no longer embittered exes, just two people who had once shared a life and now shared a common love for the children they had brought into this world. After the ceremony, Megan and I hosted a small dinner at our home for Henry, his friends, and our family. The house was filled with laughter, conversation, and the clinking of glasses. Megan caught my eye from across the room and smiled warmly, her eyes sparkling in the soft glow of the evening light. I made my way over to her, wrapping my arm around her waist as I leaned down to kiss her cheek. "This is what happiness looks like," I whispered. She turned to me, her expression softening. "It is, isn't it?" In that moment, surrounded by the people we loved, I realized that I had finally let go of the bitterness that had once threatened to consume me. Evelyn's betrayal was no longer a dark cloud hanging over my head, it was simply a memory, a chapter in a book that had closed long ago. As Megan and I watched our son, now a young man, celebrating his accomplishments and looking forward to his bright future, I knew that life, in its unpredictable way, had given me a second chance. A chance to love, to heal, and to move forward without the weight of the past dragging me down. And so, as we stood there, our fingers intertwined, I silently thanked the universe for giving me the strength to rebuild, to forgive, and to embrace the happiness that was finally mine.